My name is Amber Bondurant. I'm 32 years old, and if you had met me a year ago, you would have seen a woman who believed that love meant compromise, effort, and quiet loyalty. I built my life around steady hands and honest work, around the feel of sawdust settling on my clothes after a long day in my workshop. And back then, I believed that shrinking myself just a little, softening the rough edges of who I was simply part of loving someone. I didn't realize I had been sanding myself down for years. But here's how my story truly begins, with a dinner that split my life cleanly into before and after. Looking back, the cracks were there long before that night. It began subtly, with the kind of dismissive gestures you can almost convince yourself to overlook. One evening, I was in my kitchen, struggling theatrically with a jar of pasta sauce, exaggerating my efforts just to draw a laugh from Vincent. Normally, he would look up, grin, maybe tease me about being stronger than I looked. But this time, he didn't even glance up from his phone. He simply muttered, "Just run it under hot water, Amber," in a tone that was flat and distracted. It was a tiny moment, but something inside me shifted. I couldn't name it then, but it was the beginning of the end. I am a carpenter, someone who takes pride in creating things that last. Decks, bookshelves, custom furniture. Real pieces made from solid wood, the kind that feels substantial when you touch them. Vincent, by contrast, worked in marketing. His world was curated, polished, built on images and impressions. For the first years of our relationship, I thought our differences made us stronger. I grounded him. He nudged me toward new experiences. Lately, though, those nudges had become more like quiet corrections, especially when his two closest friends, Sarah Whitfield and Megan Brooks, were around. Sarah, with her corporate polish and unshakable confidence, and Megan, whose opinions were sharper than her stilettos, formed a social circle that felt like an arena where I was constantly being evaluated. One night, they invited us to a high-end cocktail bar, one of those dimly lit places where the drinks have ingredients no one can pronounce. Daniel, Sarah's partner, was busy bragging about some high-stakes legal case, and Megan turned to me with a smile that carried more judgment than warmth. "Vincent tells us you're building a shed," she said. I corrected her gently, explaining it was a fully insulated garden studio with French doors and custom shelving. Her response was a dismissive, "How quaint," before she returned her attention to Daniel. Vincent tried to soothe it later in the car, telling me not to mind her and suggesting I highlight the business side of my work next time. I tried to brush it off, but part of me wondered when being myself had stopped being enough. When Vincent suggested dinner at Verva, a trendy farm-to-table restaurant he loved, I thought maybe we were reconnecting. I wore the blouse he once said he liked, hoping to smooth whatever tension had been growing between us. He barely acknowledged it. Inside the restaurant, with its exposed brick and carefully designed lighting, our conversation felt strained. Every topic seemed to require caution. Then Vincent brought up Sarah and Daniel's wedding, the venue, the guest list, the pressure of seating arrangements. I tried to lighten the mood with a joke about doing embarrassing dance moves on the dance floor. Instead of laughing, he set down his wine glass and said almost clinically, "Amber, we need to talk about things like that." I asked him what he meant. He sighed, the weary, frustrated sigh that had become familiar. The jokes, the dancing, it's just a little corny. And the people at this wedding, they're important. They have expectations. When we're with my friends, I feel like I have to manage you, steer the conversation. It gets exhausting. Manage me. Exhausting. The words hit with a clarity that left no room for misunderstanding. And then came the final blow, delivered with a quiet sincerity that made it even more devastating. "Amber, I'm embarrassed to bring you around my friends." The noise of the restaurant faded. I looked at the man I had shared 3 years with and realized all at once that he hadn't been nudging me toward a better version of myself. He had been nudging me into a shape that wasn't mine. He misread my silence as willingness to fix this, which made it almost worse. "You just need to improve a little," he said. "For us." But there was no us anymore. There was only who he wanted me to be and who I actually was. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply called the waiter over. Vincent's confusion was almost comical as I paid the bill, left cash for the drinks and tip, and stood up. I looked down at him and said with a calmness I didn't fully feel I wouldn't want to embarrass you further. His eyes widened, finally understanding. "Amber, wait. Have a good life, Vincent," I said, and walked out. The night air outside felt like stepping into cold water, sharp, cleansing, bracing. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I got into my truck, blocked his number, blocked his socials, blocked any route back to him. It wasn't anger driving me. It was the instinct to quarantine something toxic before it could spread further into my life. The next 2 days were a blur of work. I threw myself into a job site, letting the rhythmic thud of my hammer drown out the echo of his words. My crew noticed my silence, but I wasn't ready to explain anything. By the third day, the raw hurt had cooled into a steady resolve. I collected the few things he had left at my place, put them into a cardboard box, and drove to his apartment when I knew he wouldn't be home. Frank the doorman gave me a sympathetic look. "Everything okay?" he asked. "It's for the best," I told him. And for the first time since the dinner, I truly believed it. Back home in the quiet of my workshop, I reached for a slab of reclaimed barnwood I'd been saving. It was imperfect, cracked, weathered, full of history. Vincent would have called it rustic with that faintly judgmental tone he used for anything that wasn't polished to perfection. But to me, it was honest. I ran my hand across its surface, feeling its texture. Then I picked up a sheet of sandpaper and began to work. The steady back and forth motion grounded me. With each pass, the sharpness of his words wore down just a little. With each stroke, I reclaimed something inside myself that I had let erode over time. I didn't have a plan yet. I didn't know what this new version of myself would look like. But I knew I was building something truer than anything I'd built with him. Something solid. Something mine. For days after the breakup, my life felt strangely quiet, like someone had turned down the volume on the world. There were no dramatic outbursts, no sudden waves of grief. Just a slow, steady awareness that I was finally breathing air that wasn't filtered through someone else's expectations. I went to job sites, met with clients, answered emails, and let the rhythm of my routine steady me. Work became both refuge and anchor. The sharp sting of Vincent's words still surfaced at odd moments, but each time they did, the impact felt a little duller, a little less capable of piercing me the way it had before. On the third morning, after finishing a long sanding session on a maple table, I stepped back and looked at the piece taking shape in front of me. It was simple, sturdy, and quietly elegant, everything he'd spent the last year trying to convince me wasn't good enough. The realization made something in my chest ease. I didn't need to be curated. I didn't need to be presented. I didn't need to fit into a world that treated authenticity as a liability. For the first time, I understood how much of myself I had been holding back to make my relationship work. That afternoon, I collected Vincent's remaining belongings, his old hoodie shampoo he left in my shower, a pair of headphones he always insisted on bringing over a framed photo of us on a hiking trail. I didn't linger on the memories attached to any of it. I placed everything neatly into a cardboard box, drove across town to his building, and handed it to Frank the doorman. He hesitated before taking it, his face soft with sympathy. "Want me to tell him anything when he gets home?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, there's nothing left to say." He nodded and placed a hand over the box gently, as if acknowledging the end of something meaningful. After that, the days blurred together in a way that felt almost peaceful. My workshop buzzed with new energy. I finished the reclaimed barnwood console table and posted a picture on my business page. To my surprise, the post gained traction quickly. People commented on its natural imperfections and character praising exactly the things Vincent had always downplayed. A local interior designer reached out requesting 2 custom pieces for a boutique hotel renovation. It was the kind of commission that could change the trajectory of my business, and the timing felt almost poetic. It wasn't validation from others that made me feel proud. It was the quiet internal confirmation that I had been right to trust my craft all along. One afternoon, while selecting cedar planks at the lumberyard, my phone buzzed. The number was local, but unfamiliar. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me swipe to answer. "Amber," a woman's voice said hesitantly. I froze. I knew that voice, even if I'd never heard it directed at me, with anything other than social politeness. Sarah Whitfield. My first reaction was suspicion. She wasn't someone who called without reason, and definitely not someone who would go out of her way to talk to me. "Hi," I said cautiously. "Everything okay?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by a small exhale. "I know this is probably unexpected, but I wanted to reach out. My birthday is next Saturday, and I'm having a small get-together at my apartment. I would really like it if you came." For a moment, I didn't respond. The sound of the lumberyard continued around me, forklifts humming wood, shifting, but my attention narrowed sharply onto the phone. I couldn't tell if this was a trap, a social test, or some kind of twisted attempt to smooth things over on Vincent's behalf. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," I said finally. Sarah rushed to fill the silence, her voice more urgent than I'd ever heard from her. "I get why you'd feel that way. I know this is out of the blue, but I wanted to be upfront. Vincent won't be there. He's not invited." That got my attention. Why, I asked before I could stop myself. Another pause. "Things have been strange since the breakup," she admitted. "He's been saying some things that made us all realize we didn't know the full story. Honestly, some of the things he said about you were just—" She stopped herself abruptly. "It made us rethink a lot. About him. About how he talks about the people closest to him." The words sank in slowly, and with them came a soft, unfamiliar ache, something like vindication, but gentler. The people Vincent claimed I embarrassed had apparently begun seeing the cracks in him too. "We'd really like you to come," Sarah continued. "It won't be anything formal. Just friends, drinks, good music. I promise it won't be weird. I'd just like to get to know you without all the noise." I considered her words carefully. On one hand, stepping back into Vincent's social circle felt like stepping into a hornet's nest. On the other, the invitation didn't feel malicious. It felt almost apologetic, like they were acknowledging something they hadn't seen before. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course, I'll text you the address. No pressure." After hanging up, I stood in the middle of the lumberyard, holding my phone, staring at the screen, as though the conversation had been unreal. For years, I had felt like an outsider among Vincent's friends, someone tolerated rather than genuinely accepted. Now suddenly the dynamic had flipped, and I hadn't lifted a finger. That night, I sat in my workshop staring at the nearly finished console table. I ran my hand across the smooth surface, feeling the grain beneath my fingertips. Accepting the invitation wasn't about Vincent. It wasn't even about Sarah. It was about whether I wanted to step into a room where people would see me without him standing between us, shaping their perceptions. For the first time, I realized I didn't feel afraid. I felt curious. When Sarah's text came through with the address, I looked at it for a long moment, then typed back a simple message: "I'll be there." The night of Sarah's birthday arrived faster than I expected. For days, I kept telling myself I might change my mind, that nothing good ever came from stepping back into a circle where I had once felt judged and out of place. But every time the doubt crept in, I reminded myself that Vincent wasn't invited. This wasn't his world anymore. It wasn't even our world. It was simply a social gathering I had the right to walk into. As myself. No apologies, no adjustments, no quiet corrections. Standing in front of my closet, I hesitated only once. Hanging at the back was the pale silk blouse Vincent always complimented, the one he insisted made me fit better with his friends. I stared at it for a few seconds, then pushed it aside and reached for a simple dark gray Henley and a soft black jacket. The clothes felt comfortable, familiar mine. I tied my hair back, applied light makeup, and took one last look in the mirror. I didn't look polished. I didn't look curated. I looked like Amber, and that was all I wanted. Sarah lived in a sleek, high-rise building overlooking the downtown skyline. When I stepped out of the elevator and walked down the softly lit hallway, I could already hear a low hum of music and conversation drifting from her apartment. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from anticipation I didn't fully understand. I knocked. The door swung open, and it was Megan who greeted me. Her eyes widened in a way that didn't look forced or performative. Genuine surprise flickered across her face, followed by a warm smile I had never seen her give me before. "Amber," she said, stepping aside. "You made it. Perfect timing. Come in." The moment I crossed the threshold, a subtle shift rippled through the room. Heads turned, but not sharply or judgmentally. It was the kind of attention given to someone new entering a gathering, not an outsider, not a problem to be managed, but simply a guest. A few people nodded politely. One man I recognized from past dinners lifted his glass in greeting before returning to his conversation. The atmosphere felt strangely welcoming. Sarah spotted me from across the room and weaved her way through her guests, practically glowing. When she reached me, she gave me a hug that felt surprisingly sincere. "I'm really glad you came," she said, giving my arm a gentle squeeze. "Make yourself at home. There's wine, beer, cocktails, whatever you want." "I brought this," I said, handing her the bottle of Cabernet I'd picked up on the way. "Oh, perfect. Daniel loves red." She smiled and headed to the kitchen with it, leaving me to take in the scene. I wandered toward the balcony doors, stopping to say hello when someone approached me. Every conversation felt different from before, Less guarded, more curious. People asked about my work, and when I mentioned the reclaimed wood console table I'd built, eyes lit up. Daniel, the lawyer, who had always seemed disinterested in anything outside his corporate bubble, ended up asking thoughtful questions about woodworking techniques and the differences between maple and oak. It dawned on me gradually the things Vincent used to warn me to tone down were the very things people seemed most interested in now. It wasn't me who had been the problem, it was the lens through which he wanted everyone to view me. For the first time in years, I felt seen without being filtered. About an hour in, I found myself at the kitchen island, talking to a woman named Claire about interior design. The conversation flowed easily, and I felt my shoulders loosen in a way I hadn't realized they were tightened. I reached for a second glass of wine just as the apartment door left slightly ajar, for guests swung open with a sharper motion than before. A hush fell over the immediate cluster of conversations. I turned toward the doorway and felt my heartbeat stumble. Standing there was a woman I had never met but recognized instantly from pictures Vincent still hadn't deleted when we were together, Lila Stanton, his ex-girlfriend. She stood frozen for half a second, scanning the room with bold expectation, as if she assumed the atmosphere would shift for her arrival. She wore a fitted sequin top and heels far too dressy for the casual party. Her hair was perfect, her makeup was immaculate. She was the kind of woman Vincent had always found appropriate for elite circles. She looked like she had walked straight out of the version of life he wanted. Then her eyes landed on me. The confidence slipped. Whatever smile she had prepared wilted on her face. Her steps faltered, and for a brief, startling moment she looked almost lost. Sarah and Megan exchanged a quick glance across the room, one I couldn't fully read, but understood wasn't welcoming. Lila didn't seem to notice. She walked straight toward Sarah with hurried steps. "Hey," Lila said brightly, reaching out as if expecting a hug. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was insane." Sarah stopped short, positioning her wineglass between them like a polite barrier. "Lila, what are you doing here?" Lila blinked, surprised by the tone. "What do you mean it's your birthday? I came to celebrate." A current of unease rippled through the room. Conversations quieted. A few guests glanced toward me, others toward Sarah. It was clear something unscripted was happening. Sarah said carefully, "You weren't invited." The silence that followed felt heavy. "I wasn't," Lila laughed awkwardly. "Okay, obviously there was a mix-up, but Vincent told me." She stopped, realizing too late the room had changed. Vincent wasn't there. His absence was loud. Her gaze darted frantically from face to face before landing back on me in a sudden, sharp pivot. Her expression twisted into something sour, wounded, and defensive all at once. "You," she said, pointing at me. "You're why he didn't come. You always were. He told me how you interfered, how you—" Lila Megan cut in suddenly, stepping forward. Her voice wasn't harsh, but it was firm. "Stop." "No," Lila snapped, her voice rising. "He's been a mess lately because of her. She ruined things between us back then, and now she's ruining things." "That's not what's happening," Sarah said quietly, cutting her off. "And you know it." Lila's face crumpled in disbelief. "You're taking her side over mine after everything." No one answered. And in the charged silence it became painfully clear that whatever story she had come here believing was unraveling fast. She looked at me again, this time with desperation instead of anger. "Amber, please, you know how he gets. Tell them he's not here," I said calmly. "And this isn't about him. This is your moment, Lila. Not an accusation, not pity, just truth." Her eyes filled with furious tears. She looked around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to pull her back into the version of reality she wanted to believe. But no one did. She wasn't the center of this world anymore. She wasn't even part of it. "Maybe you should go," Sarah said softly, as if offering mercy. And that more than anything seemed to break Lila. She spun around, heels clicking sharply, and stormed out of the apartment without another word. The door slammed behind her, vibrating against the frame. No one spoke for several seconds. The silence was thick, awkward, disbelieving, until Sarah finally let out a long sigh and murmured, "Well, happy birthday to me, B." The tension cracked, and guests slowly resumed their conversations, though their eyes lingered on me with a new, unexpected mixture of respect and sympathy. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt something quieter, like watching a storm pass and realizing you're no longer standing beneath it. I had walked into this room as myself, and I had survived the impact of someone else's chaos without letting it pull me under. For the first time in a long time, that felt like strength. When I stepped back into my workshop that night, the scent of cedar varnish and warm glue greeted me like a familiar embrace. The pendant light hanging over my workbench cast a soft golden glow across the half-finished rocking chair I'd been building for a client, a soon-to-be father who wanted something solid, something handmade, something that would last longer than trends and passing whims. I set my keys down, took off my jacket, and just stood there for a moment, letting the quiet wash over me. After the tension of the party, the stillness felt almost sacred. This workshop had always been my refuge, but it felt different now. Lighter, as though some invisible weight had finally been scraped off the floor and swept out into the night. The chaos that had chased me for months, small corrections, quiet judgments, unspoken comparisons, was gone, removed, dismantled. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was freeing. I approached the rocking chair, running my hand along the smooth armrest I'd finished sanding earlier that week. The curved grain shimmered under the light, alive with the natural imperfections that made the wood beautiful. Vincent would have called these flaws things that needed to be hidden or sanded down until the surface looked like something it wasn't. But I had always loved the honesty of wood, the unpredictable knots, the tiny cracks, the shifting color. It never pretended to be anything other than what it was. Maybe that's why I felt such a deep connection to my craft. It was real in a way my relationship never truly had been. I picked up a clamp and tightened it around one of the crossbars, securing the joints with practiced ease. The click of metal against metal echoed softly through the room. I wasn't thinking about Lila's meltdown or Sarah's apology or Megan's unexpected honesty. I wasn't thinking about Vincent at all. My mind was focused only on the work in front of me, the tangible, dependable certainty of building something with my own hands. For so long, I'd convinced myself that Vincent's polished world was something I needed to aspire to. That the way I spoke, the way I dressed, even the way I laughed, needed refinement to fit the mold of the people around him. It wasn't until I walked out of that restaurant that I realized I had been trying to force my foundation into someone else's blueprint. A structure built on borrowed expectations will always collapse. This workshop, this chair, this life, these were mine, built on my terms. I paused when my phone buzzed on the workbench. For a second, I didn't reach for it. Old habits die hard, and some part of me still braced for a message I didn't want to read. But when I finally picked it up, the notification wasn't from Vincent or anyone connected to him. It was from the interior designer who'd commissioned the console tables. The message was short. The hotel loved your work. They want more pieces. Can we discuss a full collection? I stared at the screen, a slow smile forming. This wasn't validation from someone who needed me to fit a certain mold. It was recognition from someone who valued what I created simply because it was good, authentic, distinct, mine. I set the phone down and returned my attention to the rocking chair, feeling a renewed sense of purpose settle into my bones. I tightened another clamp, adjusted a leg, and wiped away excess glue with a clean cloth. Each small task felt like a thread in a larger tapestry, proof that my life didn't have to be examined through a lens of judgment or condescension. It could be shaped by my own intention, my own craftsmanship. Somewhere in the middle of adjusting the final joint, I thought of Vincent again. Not with anger and not with longing, but with the same distant neutrality you'd feel when remembering a building you once walked through years ago. He had been a chapter one that taught me things I hadn't realized I needed to learn. His world had been built on perception, on image, on the fragile scaffolding of other people's approval. The moment honesty touched it, the whole thing collapsed. Lila's arrival at the party had only sped up what was already crumbling. And me, I had walked away before the structure fell, before it could drag me down with it. When the chair's frame was finally set, I stepped back and admired it. The gentle arc of the rockers, the curve of the backrest, the warmth of the wood. All of it came together in a way that felt deeply symbolic. This chair would outlast every person who tried to make me feel small. It would outlast trends and judgments and expectations. It would sit in someone's home holding memories, holding weight, holding life. That was the difference between what I built and what Vincent valued. His world required constant polishing to appear perfect. Mine grew stronger with every imperfection. Eventually, I cleaned my brushes, turned off the light, and locked up the workshop. Before heading inside, I stood under the night sky for a moment, letting the cool air wash over me. The stars were faint behind the city glow, but I could still see them steady, distant, unchanging. I had once built my life around someone who saw me as an inconvenience, a flaw to manage. But the truth was simpler than I ever allowed myself to believe. The version of me he found embarrassing was the version of me that was real. The hands he dismissed built a life that would endure. The voice he tried to correct was the voice that now spoke with more clarity than ever, and the world he tried to fit me into was nothing compared to the one I could build for myself. I walked back toward my house, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not excitement, not triumph, not vindication, but peace. And that peace, quiet as it was, felt like the strongest foundation I had ever stood on.